Greetings my fellow editors, Martin here from iEdit, and in today's video I'm going to explain frame rates. So the bottom line here is that the camera captures a video as a set of individual frames which form the video clip. That means that each second of a video clip contains the same amount of frames. And that leads us to what the frame rate really is. So the frame rate is basically the amount of frames a camera captures in 1 second. So here are the most common frame rates you will work with as a video editor. 24/25 frames per second, which is used in cinema or movies. Then there is 30 frames per second used in TV. And then there are the higher frame rate videos like 50/60 frames per second or 100/120 frames per second. These higher frame rate videos are used for slow motion. In my project, all of the clips were shot at 50 frames per second because I'm going to slow them down in my edit. However, I would like to export the final video as a 25 frames per second video. So in this case, we need to make sure that our sequence and timeline are set to 25 frames per second, which is how we want to export our final video. So to adjust this setting, go to Sequence and hit Sequence Settings. Now in the Time Base menu, I will select 25 frames per second frame rate for my sequence. You can, however, select anything you want based on your preferences. Now hit OK. Now I will make sure that my timeline is really set to 25 frames per second. In the timeline window you have this playhead position display. It basically tells you where your playhead currently is in your timeline. Like for example now, the playhead is 20 seconds and 10 frames in my timeline. Now I will however return the playhead to the beginning of the timeline and I will count the frames in the first second of my video. Right now you can see that we are at 24th frame and the 25th frame will be at 1 second. So now we can be really sure that our timeline and the sequence are set to 25 frames per second frame rate. But let's set back the frame rate to 50 frames per second once again to really see the difference. So now you can see that we are suddenly at 49th frame and the 50th frame should be at 1 second. Now you should really see the difference between 25 frames per second and 50 frames per second frame rate. And now I will show you how you can use higher frame rates to create slow motion. So the correct way to work with slow motion and higher frame rate footage is to set the timeline to 30, 25 or 24 frames per second. Now we will be able to modify the high frame rate footage to match the frame rate of the timeline, which will cause the slow motion effect. Alright, so the rule of thumb is that a 50 frames per second clip on a 25 frames per second timeline can be slowed down to 50% of normal speed. It's because 25 frames per second times 2 equals 50 frames per second. Then, for example, a 100 frames per second clip on a 25 frames per second timeline can be slowed down to 25% of normal speed. It's because 25 frames per second equals 25% of 100 frames per second. So let me show you the example on this 50 frames per second clip. I will use only this portion of the clip where the motion is really visible. Now we will play back the clip at normal speed. Now I will slow down this clip by 50% and let's see what will happen. As you can see, the clip is now twice as long and it's 50% slower than normal speed. With a clip which was shot at 50 frames per second, the 50% of normal speed is the maximum value where you will not lose a smooth motion. If you will try to slow down this clip to, for example, 25%, you will see that the movement will be choppy. It's much slower, but it's not that smooth because we are missing some frames. So the more you want to slow down the footage, the higher frame rate source file you will need. Okay, so as you just saw, one way of slowing down the clip is by right-clicking the clip itself, then find the speed, duration button, and type in the desired percentage of the speed. For example, 50. Another way will be modifying the footage in the project window. So find and right-click the clip in the project window, go to Modify, then Interpret Footage, and in the frame rate section type in the frame rate of your timeline. In our case, 25. So that's it for today, my fellow editors, and I'm looking forward to see you in the next video.